Good evening. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Sue. I'm a program assistant at the Elmhurst Public Library. We're very happy that we're all here together this evening. This is a hybrid. We're going to use a hybrid format tonight. So we do have attendees both in person and online. However, if you're watching from online, we're using a webinar format. And so you can see and hear us, but we cannot see or hear you. We'll have a question and answer segment at the end of the presentation. Now that means those of you in person have to remember your question. But for those of you online, go ahead and type them into the Q&A or the chat, and we will save those until the end. You don't have to remember them. This program is being recorded this evening, and anybody who is registered for the program will receive a link to the YouTube video in a few days. Let's see, on Zoom, we've enabled a live transcript option. If you would like to disable the words at the bottom of your screen, click on the closed captioning button. And if you don't see the button with CC, click on more or the button with the 3 dots and then select hide subtitles. In the library, we're using our assisted listening system. It's very easy to use. You can just come and see me in the back of the room. I'd be happy to help you. Please silence cell phones or any other devices. If you need to take a call, step outside the room to do so and try to catch the door before it closes. Bathrooms are located down the hallway near the parking lot entrance on your left. I just want to tell you about a few upcoming programs. This Thursday, the 21st at 10:30 a.m., we have a genealogy club, censuses, and city directories. And this is hybrid with a virtual presenter. So I will, if anybody in person wants more information about that, come and see me. And for those of you on Zoom, I will be posting some links to the website where you can find more information about that and the next 2 programs I'm going to tell you about. On Friday at 11:30 a.m., there's chair yoga, and that's in person. And Monday, the 25th at 7 p.m., a program about intermediate astrology. And let me tell you a little bit, I do want to tell you a little bit more about our program this evening and about our presenter. So first, our presenter is here through the University of Illinois Extension, which provides many services to the community, one of which is the expertise of the Master Gardeners. Master Gardeners are a group of volunteers trained by the University of Illinois educators to provide a network of gardening programs and horticultural activities to educate the public. One way that they can share their expertise is through the Speakers Bureau. Information provided through the Speakers Bureau programs is based on research from the University of Illinois. Our presenter this evening is Pat Kosmach. She's Master Gardener since 2000 and is the recipient of State Outstanding Master Gardener Award, sustained Excellent Master Gardener Award in 2008, and gardening since 1995. Within the Master Gardener Extension Program, Pat also enjoys volunteering for many projects, the Ronald McDonald House, We Grow Dreams, and helps at several of the Giving Gardens. She's an active member of the Master Gardener Speakers Bureau. Pat's areas of interest include water gardening, vegetables, annuals, and perennials. She currently has 1 water garden in her yard and is building another much larger one. And she also has 1 in her basement. And that's something I think I'd like to know more about. Water gardener in your basement. Welcome, Pat. Thank you very much.
Okay, this is on here. I hope the folks at home can hear me now. Good evening, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for spending some time here tonight. She gave all the first part of my usual spiel here. So why don't we go on and get going here. We have, there's actually 2 programs tonight. One is a little more humorous, this first one, a guide of what not to do. And the second part of the program is another separate presentation to let you know what to look for right around this time of the year before the trees start leafing out and things to assess the health of the trees you may have at your house. So with all that said, tonight we'll start with how to kill your tree, a guide of what not to do. And let's see here. No, there we go. Okay. We love our trees, but you know, a lot of times we love our trees too much. Trees are living beings, just like we are, and you know, they do have a limited lifespan. We'd love to keep them. We plant them for many different reasons, but they do have a limited lifespan. But things that we do are a lot of the time the reasons that that lifespan is so limited. All right. Assess the situation before you plant. Was this the wrong tree in the wrong spot for the tree? We don't know. But if you look, there's no place for the roots to grow here. And it's just a bad place to put a tree. Some trees are adapted to wet. Some are adapted to dry. There's a couple, such as bald cypress and black gum, that can work well in both places. But this is another thing to assess. Do you have a real wet site? Is it a place where water gathers? Or is it really dry? Does it never get water? These are factors to take into account when choosing a tree. Soils. A lot of times we'll have compacted soils. Trees, some trees like very fertile soils. There are other trees that like the garbagey clay stuff that we have throughout DuPage County here. You know, take a look at the site you want to put it in. Winds. Is it in a windy area? Special consideration. Some, especially in times of drought, they stunt their growth. If it's out in the middle of nowhere and it's the wrong tree, this is in Nebraska, and it can end up like this. This isn't what we wanted. We wanted a windbreak here. So take that also into account. Light. These are true dogwood trees. A lot of times, some trees are taller trees. We call these upper story. Some of the trees are understory. They grow underneath the ones that grow taller. So they get less light. Dogwood, however, needs full sun. So if it's growing as an understory tree with the less light, it'll look more like the one on the left, which is okay. It'll live, it's good, but it's never going to give you the flower show that the one on the right is that's planted in the full sun. Space. How much space does your tree need? These two maples here are pretty close together. They're probably going to go 30 feet. They'll have a reach of 30 feet from their canopy. And these are just too close together to ever grow to their full potential. All of these things can be found on the tags and labels that are on the trees in your nurseries or wherever you're going to buy them. It'll tell you how big it is, what kind of light it needs, et cetera, just like any other plant. But, you know, the other part is conflict with utilities. Some of these, this one looks like it's eating the power lines there and just got trimmed. We've all seen trees. And this one was obviously, the one on the right was obviously planted too close to the house. And the tree won and kind of pushed that all up and out of the way, just like its roots will do if it's planted too close to the house. And the roots will grow and could cause problems with your foundation. So again, think about all of the things that are kind of going into the site that you're putting it in. They need adequate soil volume too. They need enough soil so that their roots will spread out. The roots can spread out 3, 4, 5 times the canopy underneath it. So it needs soil that it can grow into. Obviously, there's none here with the one on the left because that's just planted there with the street around it. And these maples are kind of nice here in the boxes, but you know, maybe the homeowner is going to plant them someplace else later. But if these grow to be 30 feet, that box is not going to be anywhere near the amount of soil that it needs so that the roots can spread out properly. You know, plants a lot of times look cute in the nursery. Look at the one on the left there up on top. That's where we put them. We planted them there, but this is how they grow. So when they reach their full potential, they're not going to look real nice. They'll grow over your windows. You won't be able to see out. That one on the corner there looks kind of like it's taken over the gutters already. So think about what you're planting. Think about where you're going to plant it and what the site itself is. How you plant your tree. And one of the things we'll get to in the next one is the first 20 minutes of a tree's life in your yard will determine its next 20 years. And a lot of this goes into planting. You should be able to see what's called the root flare. And that would be, let's see here. Can you see my arrow? No. Okay, root flare is that little part there. We're looking at the one on the picture on the right. It's where the roots start coming out from the stem of the tree. And this needs to be at ground level or above. A lot of times we put this underneath, we plant the tree too deeply, and that can cause its demise, which is what happened to the one in the center there. Eventually, it just fell over. It rotted away and fell over because it was planted too deep. We planted too deep. The bark doesn't, what am I trying to say here? The bark will wear away too, the bark on the tree. Think about, we'll talk about mulch later, but you put it, the mulch will eat away at the bark. It'll keep the moisture up next to it and it'll eat it away. Planting it too deep, the wet is going to stay there. That looks like a really lousy clay soil there. It just finally gave up, ate away. It rotted out enough and fell over. Okay, the constrictor. Wire cage. The picture on the left is how a balled and burlapped tree is sold. Inside there is probably a wire cage someplace. There's twine holding it together. These need to be taken off before you plant the tree in the ground. The twine and the wire will not disintegrate underground, and the burlap is going to take years. Show you a picture in the next presentation of that. It can take years. And if you've got it on the bottom of the tree, the roots are going to have a hard time growing through that. So we try and take as much of the burlap off as is absolutely possible when we plant it. Root slashing. Sometimes it's been growing in this pot for too long, so we want to loosen up the roots just like we would any of our annuals that we're putting in our garden beds or our vegetables. You want to make sure there's no encircling roots. And a lot of times, arborists, when they're planting those roots up on the top there, the ones that go all the way around that plant, they'll cut those all the way off and take them off completely. If you leave them on, they'll grow, they'll get bigger, and they can basically strangle the tree. And again, we've got some great pictures of that. Like this one. One of the things people do is amend their soil. They'll take half compost and put that in with the soil that they dug out when they're digging a tree. Well, what that does is it gives the tree a great, nice hole to stay in. It's got no reason to go out and search for water. It's got no reason for the roots to go out to search for the water or the nutrients that it needs. And it'll just stay in that nice little hole there. The other thing is you see girdling roots here. These are the ones that wrap around the outside there. If you've got any of those, you want to stretch them out too. Water. Water can kill our tree. Water can kill our trees too. Picture on the left is too much. And the picture on the right is a little too late. Those gallon jugs that are down there are not going to provide adequate water, the adequate water that this tree needs. It's going to need a lot more than that. So we'll just keep that in consideration too. After planting, a tree is going to need supplemental watering for probably about 2 years. After you filled the hole and you planted your tree, you want to saturate the soil. But after that, one of the things we do is trickle the water in. Let it seep slowly in over an hour or so, just dripping by dripping, so that it can get down into the ground. It'll go into the ground. It won't sit on the top, and the tree will be able to take it up. Generally, our plants need about 1 inch of water a week, but a newly planted tree might need a little bit. Just keep an eye on it. You can stick your finger in the soil. I keep forgetting the camera's right there. You stick your finger into the soil, and if it's dry down here, water it and pull the hose out. Okay. Now, somebody had mentioned mulch here. You had mentioned mulch, sir. Too much mulch is not a good thing. As you can see from this picture, there is a mound of mulch around this tree. But if you look at where this person's hand is, you'll see how it's the stem of the tree, the trunk of the tree is all wet. Well, we're using bark here and bark mulch here, and it decomposes. Part of the reason we use it is to help hold water into the ground, but it decomposes and all the microorganisms start eating it up and eating up the mulch. But what happens is the mulch, they can't tell the difference between the mulch and your tree bark. So they start working on your tree too. And that can make it look, that can eat away at the tree. It gets it's a little bit warmer. It's a great place for mice and things to hide in the winter. So they can start gnawing at your tree and stuff. So we don't want to mulch it over. Remember, we want the tree flare above the ground. We've got good and bad. We want to think bagel when we're doing this. So just pull it back a couple inches from the trunk of the tree, and that will take care of mulching it. This is just way overdone here, and we've all seen these, whether it's in your town or it's along the expressway or something. They mulch them up like this. I watched a whole bunch of them right down North Avenue die. They planted all new trees 5-6 years ago back on all of the medians in the middle there. And a lot of them died because they were on the medians. They weren't planted properly. They had a foot of mulch up the front of them, and they all just started dying. So tax dollars at work. Okay, topping a tree. We get bad haircuts, right? That ruins our day. Well, this will ruin the tree's day. It just makes it look unsightly. What happens is here is the homeowner decided it's getting too tall. We're going to top it off and it'll grow fine. But taking the tops off like that, you're opening up a lot of wounds on the tree, and fungi and other pests can get into it and take advantage of it. Also, on this next picture here, then, notice the mulch on these two. This is what happens when you top the trees off. You get all that real spindly, ugly growth, and it's very, very weak. And the tree is trying you took all the leaves off. So the tree is putting all its energy into trying to grow more leaves because it's not able to photosynthesize and feed itself. So you get the real weak branches up here, and those those are going to fall off. They're going to break off, and it's never going to look nice again. Just a very basic primer on proper pruning. We want to identify, first thing we want to do is identify the branch collar. In the picture on the left is that piece right there, the bottom, on the bottom right. That's branch collar where it attaches to the tree itself. Sometimes it's easier to see this from underneath, but what we're going to do to prune this branch off is we're going to make 3 cuts. Okay, we'll make a first cut kind of halfway through up there. We'll take the bulk of the branch off with that second cut, and then the final cut will be right up there by the branch collar, trying to get the last of it off. And the reason we do it this way, rather than not making cut number 3 first, is because if you make cut number 3 first, the weight of the branch can take down a bunch of the bark and part of the tree and rip it down from the weight of it falling. So if you make the 3-cut thing, you pretty much avoid that. Okay, lawnmowers. This could be a danger to your trees, right? Wrong picture. I got to get a new picture for that one. The lawnmowers. You look at the tree. You look at the tree on the left there, and somebody's taking it out with a lawnmower. We got it too close to the tree, and we ran into the tree, or the teenager just not paying attention and did it anyhow, and that is a wound on your tree. And if you look around your neighborhood, you're going to see all kinds of trees, because I know I got them in mind. I live in Addison, and you'll see all kinds of trees with these great big wounds, what were wounds that had sealed up on them because somebody ran into them with a lawnmower a few years back. So again, we're trying not to injure our trees and take care of them. So just don't get your lawnmower too close. Poison. You know, a lot of times damage is herbicidal. It's from an herbicide. Take a look at this lawn here. There's not a single dandelion or weed out there. So you know they've put something on the lawn. A lot of times you can spray the lawn, that's fine. If you do it on a day that's not windy, because if it's windy, the mist from whatever you're spraying can go onto other plants. There are other herbicides though, such as this one, which is picloram, which is very mobile in the soil. So you put it in the soil for the grass to take up and kill the grass and kill the weeds. You're going to be putting it out there for the trees to suck up too, and it can harm the trees. They're all, you know, generally referred to as broadleaf plants. So any of these can kill anything else. Is kind of how it goes. So if you do need an herbicide, take a look, make sure it's not going to cause any problems with your trees. It's for the area you want to put it in, and to kill the weed you want it to kill, because a lot of times they will kill everything. So take a look at it. Okay, spruce trees in the windbreak here. This is part of the last problem. They've sucked it all up. It took the homeowner lost his entire windbreak because he didn't want dandelions in his lawn and he used the wrong thing. So he paid thousands and thousands of dollars to get more trees. So just use the right herbicide for what you're trying to kill. Okay. This is what happens when you don't read and label it. Again, it gets soaked up by everything, and everything will, have problems. Or we've got the absent-minded homeowner. This guy, he couldn't figure out why his tree wasn't growing real well. He finally takes off the suckers, and he finds the wire tomato cage that he put several years back to keep the deer away, and then forgot about. All the suckers grew up over it, and the tree was not growing to it because it couldn't, because it had the wire cage around it. So how should you plant and maintain a tree? This is your handout for this one. There's 2 handouts. So this is, take a look. All of these can be factors. These are all the incorrect things. And then the correct way to do it. And then we'll get into some of the basics here in just a minute for all of this. And we'll talk a little bit more about planting trees correctly and that type of thing. So now you know what to do. Don't let this happen to your tree. And some of our programs here. And on the next program, I'll stop at our hotline and talk about that. Gentleman named Chris, one of our educators that put this program together. So we'll give him his credit here. And then we can move on to the next part of the presentation. All right. So we just talked about what we're going to talk about here. So let's get going. First step of it is selecting your tree. Look at the shape of your trees. When you get it, we're going to the nursery. We're going to go look around, look at the shape. What is it supposed to look like? No severe heading back or pruning. We'll talk in a minute. We saw those plants when they topped them off and the pruning, and that's going to do the same thing to trees like this. We'll talk about that in a minute too. Okay, and ideally we want plants grown locally. Buy them at a local nursery who will grow them at their local, who will grow them on their sites. And buy them locally from people in the area. So you've got something that's adapted to your climate. Principle of a strong structure, 1 dominant trunk, strong canopy. That's okay, we're good. Strong canopy. Weak structure, codominant stems. This is what happens when you have more than one stem coming off of there, okay? We've all seen trees like this. They're in all our neighborhoods. But without, it's not 2 trees growing together. It's kind of going like this. And eventually over time, what happens is all sorts of debris and water goes in there. And eventually it goes like that. So we want to make sure it's got just one nice looking trunk coming up. Okay. You take a look at this and it looks all kind of full and nice and everything, but you can't see where the central leader is, where that one main stem is. Sometimes what will happen is the nurseries will head the plants back, cut them back, and that'll promote weaker growth. It looks bushier, you know, for the week or so it's going to be in there before the customer comes in and buys it, but it's still going to be weak because it doesn't have that one main stem and because it's going to have some weaker ones growing off of it. Okay, and this one we can take a look and see where it is. And that one's got a nice, straight, strong stem and the leaves look pretty good together. Okay, couple of options behind red maple. Everybody loves red maples, and we just got a couple of things here to substitute. Everybody planted maples after all the elms died, right? That's what we had. And there's some great ones, but there's a lot of other trees. Serviceberry, great small tree. Hackberry's a good tree. European beech has smooth bark, and there's lots of different cultivars of that one. Okay, tulip tree, liriodendron, and black are just a couple of other suggestions other than maples. And U of I Extension does have a website on our horticultural page that has a tree selector. Gives you some information about trees and the sites and everything. Okay, again, the most important thing you'll ever do, the first 20 minutes, the trees in your yard will determine the next 20 years of its life. And all of this comes down to proper planning. And here's just some more pictures of how to identify the trunk flare, where it is, what it kind of looks like on two different trees here. This one was planted here. However, you know, you can kind of see a few problems with this one. If you look at the leaves there, it kind of looks kind of icky. And if you look down on the bottom, you can't see the trunk flare. It's probably buried too deep. Well, then they dug it out. And this is what they found. It was definitely planted too deep. You can see where the wet part of it starts. You can see that the roots aren't growing well. They're kind of all smushed there instead of spreading out wide like they should. And you can see the tree bark from where it was buried underground isn't even there anymore. It's all rotted away. So planting hole about 50% wider than the root ball. Wider is better. We don't want it deep because we don't want to bury that root flare. Shouldn't be any deeper than the existing root ball. Be planted where it is. However, sometimes in the root ball you have problems. Trunk bark is more vulnerable to soil-related problems of root and wetness than root bark. Root bark's a little different. The roots are a little different. The trunk bark is, you know, that's not meant to be buried. The roots are. And if you plant it in a shallow hole, it'll avoid having it settle because sometimes we fill it back in, right? You put your plant in and then it'll settle in a little bit and then it'll be too deep in the ground. So we want to make sure that maybe it's an inch or so above. On this picture, that green line up there on the top, the green line of the line is where it was actually planted in the ground. And that yellow line or the orange line is where the trunk flare actually is. The root flare actually is. So that's where it should have been planted, but you can just kind of see that the roots aren't growing properly. You can see that the bark on the tree is gone there because it was underground and it rotted away. So and all that'll, you know, cause you problems later on in life. Remove the burlap. This burlap, I mentioned in the last part that you should take the burlap out, that it takes a long time to decompose. This was dug up after 13 years. So yeah, so that's why you want to take it off. And there's no way the roots are going to grow properly through that. So get off as much of that as you can. Remove your wire cages. Sometimes what happens is the nursery will take a smaller plant, put it in a bigger pot. They put the wire cage on there because it's easier to move it around. And then they'll put 3 or 4 more inches of soil around. I found this with my neighbor bought a tree and it was a Japanese maple. She got it real inexpensive And I went over and we looked at it, and then we started attacking the root ball because it had been obviously in its pot for years. And we got probably 4 inches into the root ball, digging it out, slashing up the roots, and we found the wire cage. So please take the wire cage off. This will not decompose. And as you know, it's not going to get bigger as the tree grows, and it will constrict your tree. Mulching, we'll talk about mulching a little bit again. You want it 2 to 4 inches deep. And again, think bagel, not mound. And keep it away from the stem of the tree. And that goes for other plants too. Your annuals or perennials or whatever. It'll do the same thing to there. So just take a couple of inches away from the plant stem, whichever plant it may be. No volcanoes. Just some more pictures. This was in the tree on the right was in the volcano mulch, and it also retained water. It was at a bad site, and it just kind of rotted away eventually after years. Organic mulches. I mean, mulches can be other things. They don't have to be organic. Some people use stones and things, but it helps hold water. It helps retard weed growth, keeps the soil temperature a little bit more normal. Produces nutrients and promotes root growth and trunk growth, provided you keep it away from the trunk. Post-planting care, after it's in, wrapping. There are certain real thin bark trees that will put this in that you might want to wrap for the fall, depending on your area. Thin bark species, apply it late in the fall. The crepe paper was put in here for me. I doubt I'd use crepe paper to wrap up my tree for the winter. But plastic sheath, hardwood cloth are all nice things. It helps keep things from gnawing on your tree. And some trees are, some thin bark species are susceptible to sun scald in the winter. So staking and guying, you do that to prevent it blowing over. Try and keep it steady. You don't need it necessarily. And you want to remove it after the first season of growth. You don't need to leave it up forever, because if you leave it up forever, this is what happens. This is a 20-year-old oak tree. Take a look at the stem in the middle of that there. After 20 years of growth, that's because it's been staked and it hasn't been able to grow. It hasn't been able to move or anything. And the moment they removed the wires, it fell over into the alley. So take the stakes off. The tree's roots will anchor it in after a year or so, and you won't need this. Watering. Number 1 cause of transplant failure. A lot of times people don't know how much water to give. First 2 years is establishment. And check it like I showed you with the finger to see how it's doing. Water, you want to water all the root zone. So when you take that trickle hose out, move it around every 15 or 20 minutes or so. So it gets to different parts of the root ball down there. And again, drip it slowly. If you just take the hose and stand out there like this and go like this, it's not going to get enough water. Not to mention that water you're spraying is just on the top of the ground. It's not being absorbed down and it's evaporating up and the tree's not getting it anyhow. So just trickle or drip irrigation, whichever term you prefer, are better. Pay special attention if it's your watering, if it's less than 5 years old, especially during drought periods. And again, it depends upon the species. Some need more water than others, so know your species. We had the drought in 2012. That's when my village planted my tree out in my parkway. They replaced mine. So I hauled my hose out there every couple of days for the first 2 years. And it's doing really well now, except that it's on the parkway. It is a tulip tree that is supposed to grow to 150 feet or so, but it's not going to happen because it's on my parkway. The street's right there in front of it. There's a sidewalk behind it. But this year, it looked great last year. It's going to be spectacular this year. And it's going to be somebody else's problem eventually by the time it gets there. So, okay, talked about a little bit about drought. Some of the things that can happen, some of the ways trees react to drought. They reduce their growth. Because they're reducing the growth, they're under stress. They're more susceptible to pests. New plantings and conifers can't go into the winter with drought stress. They store the water in their leaves and they lose it over the winter as the winds blow. So just keep an eye on your trees, keep an eye on the weather. All right, we'll talk about what to look for on trees that are already established, older trees, 5 years plus, that have been there or were in your yard when you moved in. The few things to look for: deadwood. Sometimes we don't see this. Now is the great time before the trees leaf out to go outside, look at your trees, see if you've got any problems. And if you do, we recommend them being addressed by a certified arborist. Somebody who specializes in trees, not the guy down the street who showed up with a ladder and a chainsaw and says, hey, I'll take that down for you. Get somebody who knows what they're doing, because you can have all sorts of problems. You might see missing bark. And this on any branch longer than 4 feet or in length or more than 2 inches wide is kind of considered dangerous because it can break and fall on somebody. Look and see if you've got any hanging branches or anything broken, be it wind, be it possibly hit by lightning, whatever that may be. And if you've got any of these or you're in doubt, have the tree evaluated. Outward sides of rot. You see those shell funguses? That's just the outside part. The inside part is inside the tree itself, eating away at all the rotting things in there. So this could be a sign that you have problems with the internal structure of your tree. Hollows or cavities, that can indicate problems. Yeah, they can stand up with the hollows and the cavities, but once you've got it through maybe about 40% or so of the structure is lost, the tree is really in danger of becoming a big problem for you. Look for splits in the tree, cracks, lightning scars, that type of thing. Those could all be up there. Look down on the ground. Take a look at the roots. Roots spread 3 to 5 times the canopy. So thinking the canopy's here, the roots are going way, way out here. What's going on in the root zone nearby? Have you put pesticides on your lawn? Like we talked about in the last one. Trees in an urban setting have an 8-year average lifespan. And that's because we put them in the wrong places. We put the wrong trees in the wrong places. Again, look to see if your tree's got a girdling root. Make sure, look for the root flare. I mean, once it's 40, 50 feet, there's not a lot you can do about moving it or, that type of thing. But also note places, and I'm going to do all of this here. Just also note any places where the roots just look wrong. Things just look wrong. You might have you might think something's wrong here. Know your tree, leaf size and color. If sometimes the veins will turn different colors. Sometimes the leaves will turn different colors. It could have nutrient deficiency, could be stress. This is a catalpa tree, and this is what this is supposed to look like, though, with the yellowish in their leaves. Some trees do have leaves that aren't your standard, bright green color. They'll have a little bit different color. So know your trees, know your leaves. And, stress can also cause problems with the leaves, too. So moving on. Just real brief here. How much is it growing? To determine this, we look at what's called the terminal bud scale scar. That tells you where the arrow is pointing at where last year's growth stopped and this year's growth began. So if you go back to the one behind it, you can tell whether, maybe it grew a little slowly this year and it's growing more this year. And you can tell kind of how much it's growing each year, just to give you a real brief idea on this one. And this is just another, they're showing you where the 2 bud scars are. So you got the longer growth there, and then the new growth at the tip of the plant there. Okay, lichens can be an indicator there's a problem. Doesn't mean anything. It just means it's in a place where the lichens like it. But and they don't cause any problem to your tree. But this has got that huge. They can also be a sign of stress. And that girdling root that you see there is definitely a stressor for this tree. Competition with other plants. Trees, their roots grow in the top 6 to 18 inches of soil. They don't go down a lot lower than that. And one of their biggest competitors for water as well as nutrients is turf grass. They didn't study at the Morgan Arboretum. They removed the lawn around the trees, and the root growth on those trees increased almost 200%, which just is absolutely amazing. But again, they took the grass out, and grass is a really hungry plant. It needs the nutrients and it needs a lot of water. So it's taking it from something else. Okay, signs of pests, real quick. Pests can be a secondary cause. The main problem, the girdling roots, topping the tree off, opens it up so the pests can get in. Is what you're seeing abiotic or biotic? Is it something that we caused? Or is it a bug or a disease such as Baroque blight? So that can, pests can definitely indicate problems. So that comes to the end of this one here. And I'm going to bring up this screen here. This is the main DuPage County Master Gardener office. We provide a helpline to the community. Give us a call, send us an email, and we'll answer questions. We'll give you a variety of grass to grow in the shade. We can suggest certain plants to grow, help you out with problems, identify bugs and diseases and that type of thing. So with that, do we have any questions?
So like I said before, if we do have any questions here in person, just put your hand up and I'll hand you the microphone. And while we are waiting, there are some questions online, but those of you who are in person, if you would like to fill out the evaluation, that would be great. There are pencils on the back table and you can turn them in a basket on the back table. For those of us who are viewing on a device, a poll is going to you right now. If you wouldn't mind answering that, do you mind just hitting the X on that one for me, Pat?
X?
Yep. And then that'll take.
Oh, okay.
Yep, they're in the corner.
There we go.
Oh, still there. All right. So I'll start out with a question here online, and then.
And it doesn't have to be about trees or tonight. We have another Master Gardener in the room, so hopefully between the both of us.
How do you feel about root stimulant put on a newly planted tree?
Doesn't need it. Doesn't need it. Trees know what to do. Just another expense when you're putting in a tree. Trees know what to do in the where they want to go. They don't need any sort of stimulants to help them. Just plant it in good soil and plant it properly.
Do you ever use concrete to fill tree cavities or wounds?
No. No. Unless the tree's already dead and you want to make a sculpture out of it. And as for wounds, trees will seal themselves. They also don't need anything. They really don't need anything. You don't have to go buy that black stuff and paint it on. They will seal themselves.
Do you recommend water gators for new sapling plantings?
Could you repeat that, please?
Water gators?
Those
bags?
Oh, those bags. Is that what those are called? You're better off trickling. I mean, those empty out. They only carry a finite amount of water. I mean, if you're going to be away or whatever and you need something, but they don't hold a lot of water in them and you're going to be going out there and refilling them all the time anyhow. So just pull the hose out, trickle it. But they do provide water, but they don't hold a lot. They don't hold enough to really do a lot.
Okay. Will dead branches on a blue spruce rebud?
Will dead branches no, dead branches will not rebud. Dead branches will not rebud.
All right. Will you, can you review the twig/bud growth?
Sure.
That might have been
a
few slides ago.
Yeah, let's go back here. Okay, this is probably the best one. This just tells you how much your tree is growing each year. Some years it'll grow less, some years it'll grow more. If it's stressed or there's a drought or whatever, it's going to grow less. So this just tells you what to look for on your tree. You go for those little kind of star things. They go all the way around the branch, and you should be able to spot them, especially now before everything leaves out.
Can you discuss ultrasound devices that determine internal rot?
I am not familiar with ultrasound devices that I would, my guess is that's something that an arborist would have, that you might have to speak with, but I am not familiar with anything.
I'm not going to do justice to pronouncing this next word, so let me show it to you.
Okay, deal. Temple of Bloom Tree, good for a parkway tree.
Heptacodium?
That would be the botanical name of it. I am not familiar with that, so I have to do a little research on that. Is it offered by your village, perhaps? Because most villages will have a list of trees that they'll get for you. I know mine did, but I knew which one I wanted.
That was my last one online. Does anybody, unless somebody adds more information about that Temple of Bloom tree, if you want to add some more information, Pat was asking if that was something that was offered by your village. You can maybe add that. Does anybody have any questions here? Yep.
The question for the sources of information, you have the extension .illinois.edu/DKK for DuPage.
That stands for DuPage, Kane, and Kendall.
Right.
We kind of all work together. We're kind of all one unit, but I'm here representing just DuPage at this point.
But are there other sites? I'm particularly concerned for those people either who don't know much, or there are people who just kind of disagree with some of the things you've said.
Oh, absolutely.
I agree, but they don't. So who do we?
Here's globally our programs. U of I Extension has a great horticultural website. There are others, Missouri Botanical Gardens, Purdue University. And those are ones that come to mind. The Arboretum, the Botanical Gardens here up in Glencoe. So, and all of those are great resources of information. You can call any, I know that the Arboretum has a help desk also. Also ours does take plant samples too, so as does the Arboretum.
And a second question for you had the slide that talked about how grass can definitely interfere with the growth of the tree. I can see why, but do you have a good recommendation for what would be a good circle, what diameter around the tree that would be, say, mulched and definitely not grass?
Well, I'd start with under the canopy. Generally, it's all shady, and a lot of times grass will not grow well anyhow because it needs full sun. So I'd go out at least as far as the canopy with the mulch. Now you can probably plant some spring bulbs in there too, because the tree won't have leafed out. You can see the bulbs and they'll be done before then, but just add a little more color or something into there. But I'd mulch it all the way out to the drip line. Please.
Okay. Hi, I'm a newbie. So I have a question then, thank you, about we're going to be doing some landscaping this summer. So when we're planting new trees, should you not plant anything then underneath the canopy? I know you mentioned like annual bulbs, but should you not plant other perennials?
You could put other things, but again, it will compete.
Take away from the roots.
Right.
Okay.
I just suggested bulbs because they're easy, they're early. They don't take a lot of care, and they're not going to compete a whole heck of a lot.
Okay.
Yeah. Right.
Okay.
That's a really good point.
Okay.
The annuals you plant every year.
Yep.
Three different types of plants: annuals, perennials, biennials.
Okay.
Annuals live their life, set
Right.
seed 1 year. Perennials keep coming back, and biennials will grow a set of leaves the first year, overwinter, and then flower the second year.
Okay.
And that would be something like hollyhocks.
Okay.
So, good luck.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Oh yeah, I find a lot of that under my trees too. Garlic mustard is a nasty plant. It's one of those invasive things. If you haven't seen it, you will real soon. Yeah.
Let's see. We've got any negatives about cultivar trees?
Just plant the right tree for your site. There's so many different kinds. There's so many different answers to that. Plant the right tree for the site. And again, the University of Illinois, the website, or give the office a call. I'll get the number back up here for everybody, or give us a call and we can make some recommendations, after you've assessed the site and that type of thing. Please.
Sure. In addition to being a master gardener, I'm also on the Elmhurst Coal Cities Coalition, and we've got an initiative going on right now called Start in Your Yard, which is encouraging people to plant natives, and that includes trees.
Mm-hmm.
I was not personally involved, but some of our members recently met with our city officials to go over. If you want a parkway tree, you have a list of trees to select from.
Right. It's their property, so they decide.
Right.
That's how it worked for me too.
Right. And some are natives and some are not.
Yes.
So we're strongly working to encourage the city to amend their list so it has a much larger number of natives. So if you're talking to your alderman, please suggest and encourage that. We found out one of the reasons that it's going to take a while to change that is because the city buys their trees in cooperation with other cities in the area so they can get in bulk. And those orders have already been placed. So it takes a while to be able to change what's on our list of choices. But if you're looking for a parkway,
they could go over the list and, note the natives. If there are any on the list.
there are some on the list. So if you're looking for a parkway tree, try to select one of the native ones and also encourage them to get more on the list. Thank you.
As long as you have the microphone, I just added.
Oh, thank you.
Do you want to just talk about it real quick?
Sure.
Added it to the chat. So
awesome.
You. Yeah, thank you very much. I'm also the chair of the Green Team at the First Congregational Church in Elmhurst. And after a 2-year hiatus due to COVID, we're reviving our Green Garden Fair. I would like to invite you all to join us on Saturday, May 7th from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. We'll have, I think we're up to 17 different exhibitors at the church outside on the lawn, helping you to learn how to lead a greener life. Particularly as it relates to gardening. If you ordered organic seedlings through our pre-order process, they'll be available to pick up at the fair. And if you missed our pre-ordering, we will have additional organic seedlings, vegetable, herb, and flower seedlings, as well as compost and growing mix available on a first come, first serve basis that morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Another vote online for planting native trees.
Oh, absolutely.
And said no Bradford pear trees. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Pat. Thank you for all your information.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, everybody, for coming. And we'll see you soon.
All right. Have a good night, everybody. Thank you for joining us.